Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description and every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today, I'm here to do something a little different. I'm here to talk about my first ever experience. This is the first episode of my play along with The Last of Us HBO TV series. So what I decided to do, in case you didn't watch my review of the first episode or the preview episode I did, I was thinking about blowing the dust off of my version of The Last of Us game. I have The Last of Us Remastered for PlayStation 4. I have PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and I have a fairly decent amount of games, and I just never have time to play any of them. Most of them are still in the wrapper. If I do have time, I only have a few minutes, something like that, usually because I'm trying to get to watching some of these shows that I review for this channel. And I figure, what would be a better time for me to finally get to play this game, which I've wanted to play for a very long time. I've heard all about it. It's at the top of all the games that I have. It's at the top of the list of the ones that I've been wanting to play. And I thought, what better occasion than to kind of like play this game for the first time and experience it along with the television show. Generally, I try to shy away from video game shows, but if you watch the preview episode, the team behind this show is one that does not fuck around. And we're gonna be taking them really seriously. And this show had all the ingredients of something that had the makings of like great television stew. So I knew I was going to want to watch this show, and I thought, maybe it could be some extra content where I could talk about kind of like, okay, here's my experience playing the game, but then also here's my experience with it as it relates to the show. Like, okay, because my goal right now, my plan is to try to play the game along with the episodes of the show, kind of like to get to a point where I feel like I'm at about the same point the episode ended, and then that's where I'll turn off the game for that time before I start to do one of these videos. That's the plan. And then in those videos I can say, okay, here's what was in episode 1 that I experienced in the game, and so on and so forth. So that's the goal of this video series. The plan is to put one of these videos out every week, either on Thursdays or Fridays. Ideally I'd like to do Thursdays, but that doesn't really feel feasible right now, so Fridays is likely going to be where this is going to land. And then that can make it so that I have a review of the television show on Monday, the video game on Friday, and then another television show one on Monday. That's why I like Thursday. It's a bit more in the middle. But so I want to start talking about this game. So the first thing I want to talk about is I already like about this adaptation. It's removing a lot of the things that are that don't translate well from video game to television, keeping the things that do, but then improving upon them. So what I mean by that, and I think the first example of this is the very opening of both things, the opening of the episode and the opening of the game, which feature essentially the same storyline, the storyline of Joel's character and losing his daughter Sarah. And in the show, I feel like this moment, this pivotal moment in this character's life was done way better on the show than it was on the game. And I think the reason for that, and I know a lot of you might be like, what the fuck? Like, how you gonna slander like one of the most pivotal moments in video game history? And it's like, from video game standards, it works. But they I don't know if it works as well if you do it the exact same way on a television show. You can't do it the exact same way on a television show, honestly. And you need to find a way to have a moment like that carry the kind of impact that it carried in the game. You want that impact to translate to the television show, but you can't do it the same way you did it in the game. So you got to find a way to make that impact translate. And I think what they did well on the show relative to the game is they spent a little bit more time. And when I say a little bit more time, the episode ran about an hour 10, something like that. And maybe those first 20, 30 minutes were spent on this portion of the storyline. And then, not surprisingly, but about that same amount of time was spent on that portion of the video game. The difference is the video game had a lot of that 20, 30 minutes was spent like walking around, like, oh, here's a clue. And let me examine this thing, learning the controls, searching this house. Where's Joel? Let me go upstairs. Let me go downstairs. Let me search. Like all of these things that are part of playing a video game, because you want to, okay, what is my environment like? What do these items mean? Okay, it told me when I walk by this one thing to press triangle. That means I can pick it up. Learning those things that you need to learn to go through the video game. But none of that shit matters to the TV show. So if you strip all of that shit out, all you're left with is like 30 seconds of this happening. And that doesn't really work for a television show. So I thought the show did a better job of giving Joel and Sarah more time. We can establish their relationship, how close they are with one another. The whole thing with the watch that we see in this opening sequence, her knowing how important it was to him, her getting it fixed, her giving it to him as a gift. All of these things are done to help us, the viewer, understand the relationship between Joel and Sarah. So that way, when Sarah's taken away, we can feel that same impact that we felt in the game. But like I said, the show can't pull all that stuff over, just walking around the house and shit like that. And I felt like the game used that time a little bit better to just be like, okay, let's give more and more examples to help the audience understand how close these two are. And I think that made that scene work a lot better. Because for me, I watched the show first and then experienced the game after. So I playing the game and I'm like, okay, this is obviously going to be the Sarah death scene or whatever. And it got through it, and I'm like, damn, the show did that way better. But again, like I said, I spent a lot of time walking around up to that and not a lot of time developing the Joel-Sarah relationship. Like, for instance, I'm not even sure Joel's name is said, like, in this sequence here. Like, so for us as a video game player, it's like, okay, I spent 20 to 30 minutes, like, learning the controls, learning, that I need to search my environments, those sorts of things. Very Resident Evil-esque, this game feels. And what was the point I was trying to make? It's just like, okay, it's this guy and this daughter, and then his daughter gets killed. And it's kind of like, oh, that's sad, because anybody can understand the pain of losing a kid. But what they built for us between those two, it wasn't enough for that scene to really land where I'm just like, oh, man. Because for me, it was just some guy and some girl. The only reason I even knew who they were because I watched the show first. But if I had played the game, I'd have been like, okay, so this guy's daughter died 20 years ago. All right. And then I'm just like, okay, so I know that probably shaped who he is going forward in this game. I know that. But the death itself would have had virtually no weight for me, anyway, playing the game, especially when you compare it to the weight it had watching the show. So I thought that was my biggest takeaway from my experience. Another thing that I thought was cool was how it seemed very much, I doubt anything is shot for shot, but the whole thing of them, Joel, Sarah, and Tommy escaping in the truck. And I talked in the video about how it felt like a video game having the camera inside the truck. So you're like looking through the front windshield, and then like, Sheila turns around, you looking through the back windshield, and the car is moving around. And I'm like, it added an extra bit of like, oh, I feel like I'm here, as opposed to like, I feel like I'm watching a good scene. But so I like the fact that the game, that really was from the game, and the game had it like that. But what the game did that I thought was cool was allowing you take control of Sarah. Well, you already have control of Sarah at this point. You have control of Sarah, and then you can move Sarah around in the back seat and look out the back windshield while they're still driving forward. So you can kind of like see the fucking scenery and shit. Like if I think there's like a moment where you hear somebody scream or something, or you see a car accident, and like I was able to shift Sarah so I could watch that aftermath as we drove by, which I thought was a pretty cool aspect of that scene. So I got to a point where I'm not really sure if this is the kind of like around the same point as the end of the episode. And I'm going to tie this into something that I think that the episode did really well. That again is something that you kind of need this for TV, and you don't necessarily need it for a video game. And I'm wondering if they scrapped it all together or if I haven't got to it in the game yet. So the episode of the show ends with everyone discovering Ellie's actually infected. Joel beats the shit out of the one guy, the guy that he was doing the drug deal with earlier, who he caught pissing, all that kind of shit. This, where I stopped the video game, is past the point where Ellie's infection status becomes known. She gets the same group of 3 gets apprehended by, I think it was like two, maybe even 3 officers, and that information comes out and they kill the officers. But then the game just continues. And I didn't know if, am I going to come across this guy and we're going to have to kill this guy? And are we going to have Ellie Ellie watching Joel beat the shit out of some cop? Like, is that going to happen or not? Or am I just going through that? And that's just something that they added to, proceeding through the game. And that's just something they added to the TV show for the added kind of like, again, emotional impact. So the reason that scene works in the show, one, we already know this guy. So we're like, oh, Joel already knows this guy. We might be safe. And then then we see the guy kind of turn up, like pulling the gun and making them all kneel. And like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we're not going to be safe here. And then once Ellie's vaccination status is revealed, infection status is revealed, the guy wants to shoot everybody. And then we have the moment of Joel attacking that guy and beating the shit out of him because he's kind of like having flashbacks / PTSD from what happened to Sarah. The same idea of like, I'm protecting a kid and now I got a soldier pointing a gun at me. And now I'm not going to handle that situation the same way I handled it the first time, which made me lose a daughter. Like, all of that works within the show. And I don't know, but did they just remove that altogether? And now it's like, okay, Ellie's infection status is discovered in the game at this point, and then it keeps moving forward where I'm like, right now, I'm at a point where I'm kind of like moving through an area that's just outside the quarantine zone, I believe. And I think the goal of this portion of the game is for me to move through this area without really having to engage any of the soldiers because they have the high road and they're like shooting down at me and shit, and I can't see them when I'm looking around. So I gotta kind of like, crouch behind and move behind things to try to make them so they don't see me. And I'm wondering if like that's just how the game is gonna progress until we get to, the next pivotal moment in the story. And the game doesn't even include this moment with the soldier, which is fine for the game. The game doesn't necessarily need that, but it really worked for the show, and I was wondering if I was going to get that on the game, and as of now, it kind of looks like I didn't, since that happens at the time that Ellie's infection status is revealed, and that didn't happen at that time. So, and I haven't even been introduced to a cop or a soldier that Joel already knows, who he's been doing smuggling deals with. And that's another thing too. That's not in the game either. Like, all of the character building about Joel being a smuggler and what he's dealing with and all this information about the tunnels, like all that kind of stuff comes out in the episode without anything happening, in the sense of like, before they're even out doing those sorts of things, it's already coming out about Joel's current status during this 20-year time gap. Whereas on the game, and this is an advantage of the game, by the way, the game disseminates this information while you are also moving through the game. So like the things that feel kind of time wasty, where I'm just like walking around, they're not time wasty because characters will exchange information during those times, and then that's how they kind of like give you the information but still move the game forward. Whereas like the show can kind of sit in place for a while. Like, they could be in a room and have a conversation, and we can observe behaviors. Like, the interesting thing about this first episode and about the game, because both things are in the game, which this is another comparison that I like. The moment where Joel and Ellie arrive in what I'm guessing is something like a hideout room actually in the show, I don't even know what this room was. I assumed it was just a room within Joel's house, but in the game, or wherever Joel is staying at the time, or maybe that is where he's staying, but in the game, it kind of feels like it's like a room that's just in like this big abandoned building with a whole bunch of rooms, and it's kind of like, what's the probability of ever being found here? And it kind of feels like a random room that he just has kind of like taken for himself to like stash in. But him and her chill out in this room. She's like, what am I supposed to do? He says, you'll figure it out. Both things happen exactly the same in the game. The room looks exactly the same, which I thought was really good. And then the whole scene with Ellie discovering that the music with the smuggling code. I don't believe that happened in the game though. Like I feel like she woke up. Like once he woke up on the show, she's like she just does the little trick where she figures out that 80s music means something bad. I don't believe that happened in the game. Like I feel like he just woke up and then Tess arrived and then they left. But I thought that really worked on the show. And those are kind of things you need to focus on the character building on the show, whereas the video game kind of needs to focus on moving the plot forward, but it wants you to feel that it feels more realistic if you actually have to say walk from one place to the next as opposed to just like cutting like a show will do. We need to go here, cut, now we're there. Whereas the video game is like, we got to flesh out fucking 40 hours of gameplay here. You need to go from here to here. You need to walk your ass to that motherfucker and we'll just find things to entertain you along the way. So I guess right now, this is already going longer than I expected to. I guess right now, my first impression is I feel like the show is doing a great job of giving us the important stuff and then fleshing those things out more than the game does. And that's how it's spending its time. And then the game, on the other hand, might not be fleshing out these big moments, but they have way more time to work with. So and they want you to have the experience of playing a video game and not watching a TV show. Because if you do that, you're just watching shit, watching cutscenes and shit like that. You might as well be watching a TV show. So you need to be able to play, move from one place to place, come across enemies, get in conflicts, etc. And so the game has that to spread out. But they continue to move the plot forward even when it feels like you're doing something that's kind of mundane, like it feels like a side mission or some shit. Even while you're doing that, the plot is still being advanced. So the game's working in that respect too. So, but right now, I think it's a little bit too early for me to even kind of judge the game at all, much less comparing it to the show, because I just feel like I'm like 1% of the way through the game, whereas I know I'm at least 10% of the way through season 1 of the show. Actually, I think it's only 9 episodes, so I'm a little further than 10%. But that's my experience so far. That's where I'm at. I feel like I'm around where episode 1 ended, so I'm gonna watch episode 2. Pick it back up next week. Oh, actually, what I might do, I still might pick it back up tonight or over the weekend and still just kind of like play through it. It's just I don't want to get to a point where now I'm spoiling the show because my primary experience is the show and my primary goal here is to talk about the show for you guys. So I don't know, maybe not. But all I have to say, I'm done with this one. I'll be back probably Friday for another installment of me comparing this show to the game. I will see you guys next week for that. And until then, peace.